Chris Castanes started out selling insurance door to door in rural North Carolina, basically the boot camp of sales with a sense of humor required. Now he teaches professionals how to use humor as a strategic tool, not a punchline. From awkward stories to virtual selling flops, Chris brings laughs, lessons, and plenty of sales wisdom you didn't see coming. This is Strategy Talks, and today we're selling smarter and funnier. Stay tuned.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Morin-van.
Wahoo! This is episode 150 of Strategy Talks. I forgot to bring the confetti in, as I just said in the green room, spaghetti. I don't know what I need to bring, but anyway, either way, 150 episodes. We are in season 4, kind of towards the end, and I cannot believe I've had that many guests and that many people listen to Strategy Talks. It's been an amazing journey, and I'm definitely on the road to another 150 or more. So I'm very excited. You are here today for this episode. We are going to do a lot of laughing, selling with humor. Before I bring onto the screen my friend Chris, I want to welcome all of you to Strategy Talks. Those of you who might be watching live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or YouTube, or those of you who might be listening to Strategy Talks as a podcast. I really appreciate you being here. If you're watching it as a replay on one of these platforms I just mentioned, if you have questions, put hashtag replay in the comments, and myself or my guests will respond to your questions. Thank you so much for being with us today. And so it's time to introduce you to today's guest. There's Chris. Hi, Chris. How are you today?
Hey, how's it going? Congratulations on 150 episodes. Who knew that when you started this little crazy little podcast, you would be here right now? And you have provided nothing but value to people. So kudos to you. Congratulations. May I wish you 150 more.
Thanks. I really feel that way. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's a lot of time spent in front of the camera. It's a lot of time spent with some amazing guests. I have this huge spreadsheet, from year to year to year to year with all my guests in it. And I just looked back the other day and I just cannot believe the names of the people I've interviewed. Chris, you're going to be on this list. It's amazing. I'm so excited to have you here with us today.
Well, I'm glad to be here and, to be part of the 150th anniversary celebration. I'm sure there's going to be people taking the rest of the day off today because of this.
Maybe I am. How about that?
Let's hope. I'm planning on it. Actually, I was kind of planning for a nap, but now it's going to be celebration, then nap.
That's awesome. So, Chris, you've been selling since grade school, and you did door-to-door insurance in rural North Carolina. I have a question for you. What did those early sales and experiences teach you about reading people? And what did you learn from that? Did those lessons you learned about reading people's faces and body language still shape how you communicate today?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, you just, especially when you're doing door to door, anything, people, it's different if you go to someone's home, how I started, and try to get them to buy accident insurance that they don't want, and they've never heard of the company, or they've heard of it, but they didn't like it or whatever. You pick up the sense. I mean, it's not necessarily like, telling if they're lying or something, but you just get the vibe right when you walk in the door. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's welcoming. Sometimes it's scary. I've had people threaten me, so yeah, I mean, it's like, what are you doing at my house? And nowadays, nobody even really does that. If you came to my front door right now and started beating on my door, I'm going to look out the window and go, I don't know that person. I'm not going to answer it probably. Just like now we have cell phones where we, have caller ID. back in the old days, we were insane. We actually answered every phone call that came through. So
Right.
as far as reading people, once it's not science. You can pick up that vibe just by most of the time. Now, lots of times it doesn't quite work, and you something and it just falls flat. That happens too, So it's not a science, but it's just trying to just pick up the feel and the sense of the room, and then you can go from there.
So did you start using humor to connect with people? So because you're a humor-driven speaker and sales trainer, you have your own company. Humor can be risky in business, Chris. What do you say to people who say we can't use humor in selling or in any part of our business because it's too risky?
Well, it depends on what kind of humor you're using, first of all. You're not going to go into a funeral home business and dress like a circus clown and start yucking it up with everybody. But, there again, read the room a little bit. If I'm in a situation where, say it's somebody I know, I don't have to know them well. If I'm an acquaintance of theirs, you can push their buttons a little bit. People like to be picked on just a little bit sometimes. I went into an attorney's office with a coworker one day who didn't know the attorney, but I did. And we were just talking, and I was getting some basic information from him, found out he was about 6 months younger than me. And I just picked on him. I was like, dude, you look like hell, man. What's the matter with you? You look horrible. And he started laughing. The other guy working with me was terrified. He was like, oh my God, you're blowing the sale for us. But I'm just giving the guy some crap, it was just busting stones, as we say. But, there's other times you just have like my best suggestion is create a little patter, a little, handful of jokes that you throw out there sometimes. And they're safe. They're nothing bad. I'll meet some woman and I'll be doing a benefit enrollment, say, and I'll have an employee in front of me and I have to go over their dependents. Oh, how is Bob your husband? Yes. And then I might throw out, is Bob behaving this week? And, and about 90% of the time I get a little chuckle like you just gave me. Yeah. But then every once in a while I'll get, well, as a matter of fact, no, he's not. And we're getting a divorce. And okay, that might feel awkward, but she got that off her chest. And then I might go, well, I guess Bob's not behaving then, is he? And that creates another chuckle. I've had the unfortunate chance of having people go, well, actually, Bob passed away last week. And okay, well, sorry for your loss. We'll move on. But, a little joke every now and then, it's not bad. I'm in the insurance business. We're talking about people dying when we talk about life insurance. There's not a lot of humor there, but you need a little levity. It's a very serious subject, and you want to have a little bit of levity. So I'm not going in and just, like I said, one-liners after another, but every once in a while I'll, might throw out the little joke we have, which is, wives hate life insurance, but widows love it, and things like that. Just little cheesy little jokes, and what it does really in the long run is it gets people's guard down. If they chuckle a little bit, you can just feel the tension, not all of it go away, but people would go, okay, this guy's trying to sell me something. He's trying to, I don't know, we all have that thing where you go to a used car lot and all the guys come out of the corner and your shoulders hunch up and you get very defensive. But if you could tell a little joke and just kind of get the guards down a little bit, everybody takes a deep breath. Now we can relax and talk. And that makes it so much easier if you know how to do that. And it's not, it's something you can learn. It's just, like I said, have a handful of little jokes in your back pocket, nothing major, nothing, of course, that's going to offend anybody. Just kind of have a couple of little, remember those Dixie Riddle cups when we were kids and they had the little dumb jokes on them? Those kind of.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to ask you about, you said, have them in your back pocket. So, to get some actionable advice here, do you write them down? Do you have them on a card? Do you practice them with a family member? Do you just throw them out and see if they hit? And then when they hit, you're like, okay, this is the keep pile. This is the go pile.
There you go, right there. You just hit the nail on the head. You know, I
Okay.
mean, it helps if you have some jokes ahead of time and you know them, and then you can always customize them. You know, you could, I mean, to each situation.
Sure.
You know, and if you don't know any jokes, gosh, go to AI and go to Perplexity and say, do you have a life insurance joke that's appropriate for me to tell to a client or
Oh my
something,
gosh.
whatever you're selling? And
Yeah.
then cut, I mean, I wouldn't say it verbatim, but there again, if the client doesn't know you and how you speak normally, they're not going to know if you did say it verbatim, because they're going to go, oh, that guy just talks like a robot. But, you know, you can come up with little things, and just if somebody laughs, I go, oh, that's a good one. I'll stick with that.
Yeah.
You know,
No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, in your stories, you often lean into moments of failure, awkwardness. How do you decide, like, the stories that you share about your own failures and awkwardness?
well, I mean, they're just stories that I just remember, I guess, and that's why, you know, when I have the story about the lady that I tried to sell some life insurance to one time, and she got very upset because she had told me exactly the amount she wanted. She had done all the research. She said, I only want $15,000 worth of life insurance today. And I said, okay. And I came back to her a couple of days later with a $15,000 and a $20,000 quote. And she got very upset. And she goes, why did you do that? I told you exactly how much I wanted. You're just trying to make extra commission. And this was for her final expense insurance now. And I said, well, when you were figuring in all that, did you consider an open bar at your funeral? And she chuckled. She, you know, as if she got it. I was kind of pulling her leg a little bit. And she goes, okay. And she bought the $20,000 one instead, which I had no plans of her buying. I just took an extra smart ass pill that morning and just decided to go for it. And she laughed, and I ended up making, you know, an extra $2 a month off of her or whatever it was. So
Yeah. No, that's a great example where humor helped you along, and it's also a great sales tactic, right? You always want to give them options, so that made a lot of sense. You weren't going to go, if she asked for 15, you weren't going to go give her a 10, 15, and a 20. So it makes
no.
sense to put in the other one. So when we talk about what happened in the last 5 years or so, you shifted from in-person selling to a more virtual model. What changed for you, how you use humor once you were virtual, right? Through Zoom, camera lenses. And I want to mention here that you just started your own podcast, which, you know, I'm very excited about. I'm one of your upcoming guests. And so how has humor carried on in online? And, you know, we're laughing. You and I are friends. We've known each other for close to 15 years. So of course we're going to chuckle and we're going to throw back and forth. But if you're new and you're meeting somebody on Zoom or virtually, it's harder to read their body language. So how have you made that adjustment? And are there any lessons there for all of us?
I'll be the first to admit I have not adjusted to it well. And that's because, for lack of a better word, for me, humor, not in this situation, because there again, like you just said, we know each other. But for me, it's hard for me to see an audience of, you know, 15 people or 100 people and see their reactions to what I'm saying. When you're speaking in person, you get that immediate feedback. And especially in comedy, and I've done some stand-up comedy years ago, and, you know, if something falls flat, it falls flat. But if it goes good, you want to hear that. And unfortunately, when you get into a Zoom call with a bunch of people, I don't hear the laughter. And it's almost like reading a comedy book. I don't know if you've ever seen, like Woody Allen would put out a book 40 years ago, and it was kind of funny, but at the same time, I'm reading it instead of hearing the voice and everything. So for me, it never really translated across Zoom calls and things like that very well. And that was probably on me. I'm the first to admit to it. But at the same time, what I did do was I started going more towards memes and making funny little videos and putting things like that together, where I go to Facebook and I just steal pictures of, you know, old TV show characters and things like that. And I would say, like, well, this is your face when you find out your spouse bought life insurance or something. And I started doing that kind of thing. And thank God for Canva, because it made it really easy. I'm, a little bit remedial sometimes. So I wanted to, still keep going out there. During COVID, I started a blog. I worked on my websites. I was making all kinds of memes, just trying to keep my brain active. And now, here we are, and it's okay. It's all good. And the podcast is fun. The podcast is just something else for me to do now. I had a YouTube channel, and it became people were just kind of going on there and making commercials for themselves. And I was like, I want something a little bit better that's going to have information people can use, and we'll still have some fun and yuck it up a little bit,
Yeah. So I know you've been using humor forever. So there's also some, like you just said, stand-up comedy, humor that falls flat, mistakes you make, like telling somebody or asking somebody, how's your husband? And, oh, he just died, kind of thing. What are the lessons we can all learn? And then, when we're talking about sales, right? Selling with humor, what can we learn from some of those mistakes or making that? Should that make us more cautious? Should that make us do more research? Should that make us not use? Like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned? Or is the lesson win some, lose some, move on? I would love to know your take on that.
It is kind of win some, lose some. It's trial and error with some jokes. But at the same time, once you create that little pattern, like I said earlier, of just having the same, you're not going to tell jokes constantly, but you just want to, if something kind of tenses up in a situation, have a way of getting out of it. If somebody says, something, I don't know, you just have a quick response that might ease up the tension there. Again, lower their shields, lower the tension in the room. It's not hard to do. It's just if you're not funny, or if you don't feel comfortable to do something like that, then don't do it. I remember years ago, I was shopping for a car, and the salesman, I was dating a girl at the time. This was 40 years ago. And the salesman just made a very inappropriate comment. And I love humor. I love a good dirty joke. Trust me. But even I was kind of like, really, dude, this girl's right here. And you just threw that out there. And he was, and that made it worse, because then he starts backtracking and yammering and, I don't know what I did that for. And, whatever. And of course, we went to another dealership. So sometimes it backfires on you. Most of the time, like I said, you're just going for a chuckle. I'm not going in for the hardcore laugh. I'm just trying to get them to relax a little bit and just say, hey, little things like if somebody comes in and they're older than me, I'll call them young man. How you doing today, young man? Like that, that kind of, nothing's going to offend anybody, but it's kind of humorous, and it's just very, very light humor. Making a comment. Don't talk about people's looks, or unless you're going to compliment them. Right. There's been times when I'll just, ask, like, I love those orange glasses on you. Those look awesome. Where'd you get them? Did you think of that by yourself, or, but you're not going to make fun of somebody's lazy eye or the hump on their back, or,
right.
Whatever.
That makes a lot of sense, Chris. It sounds to me like you've done this forever. You are just a easygoing, humorous guy. Somebody might be listening, might be watching, and saying, it just doesn't feel natural to me. Is there a way for them to learn or to improve some of their improv? Like some of their comebacks, some of their language around selling and humor. I know you wrote a book. You're going to be great at this. Is that like almost like a handbook of, hey, get this book and you're going to learn some selling techniques that have to do with humor? Did you take an improv class? You did stand-up comedy. Is this just who you are? Or do you feel like there's definitely, competency, skill, like years of learning?
Yeah, I was born like this, I think. Okay. So, I don't know. I was the kid in grade school who had joke books. I would go to school and go to the lunchroom, and I would read out my jokes and stuff. And I had joke books. And I love watching stand-up comedy as a kid. I mean, I had pictures of Steve Martin on my wall when I was a teenager and things like that. So yes, I was kind of a student of the game ahead of time. But by the time I was doing stand-up comedy, I was well into my late 40s. And, and then from there, what I did was I went to Toastmasters, though, because Toastmasters, it was very inexpensive for what it was. And it was a great networking tool, but it was also, they teach you how to speak professionally. And that was really, really difficult for me because, like I said, I can sit in a room full of my friends and tell them the world's dirtiest and sickest jokes and we all laugh, but you can't do that at Toastmasters. But you can inject some humor, and it's a great place to learn. It's a safe environment. Everybody's giving you some positive feedback. They'll give you constructive criticism. But if you do let, improper words slip out or something, which some has happened to me on occasion, then, they'll give you a little clap back and say, look, you don't do that next time. That helps. I always tell people, if you really want to be good as a speaker and whether you're talking to two people or a room full of people, you need to have a good vocabulary. And the best way to have, because you don't want to say the same words all the time. It sounds like you don't know, but those words. So the best way to do that is read. I read a lot of books. I'm always reading. I don't know, anything that's going to be language related. I like that kind of stuff. So, it's
that is excellent advice. I love this. Toastmasters, read a lot, use different words, say the same thing 5 different ways. It totally makes sense, but it's not something that people think about when they're honing their speaking skill or their communication skills, right? We just, we might read specific communication information, but we might not think about, reading a novel or reading, a fiction book and learning about structure just by reading it and processing it. And that is what it takes, right? Listening to other people's conversations. That makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like listening to podcasts has helped you as well?
Oh gosh, yes. I love podcasts. There's so many topics and you can hone down onto so many different little subtopics. I can go to your podcast and learn about different marketing strategies, and then in the same breath, turn around and listen to a history podcast or listen to, something funny or newsworthy or whatever. I'm always listening to podcasts when I'm sitting at my office here at the 87th floor of the Castanes World Trade Center Tower, whatever I just made up. Everything I say is true, by the way, because I'm in sales and you can trust me. And so, and there again, that's one that I use a lot when I first meet people. They go, "Oh, you're in insurance," and I go, "Well, you can trust me. I'm in sales." And they just go, and I'm like, everything I say is true, and they immediately are like, "Okay, this guy is either an idiot or he's just trying to,
No, so what I hear there is you're using humor about yourself. So making yourself the target of your own humor, right? You're the subject now, like, oh, make fun of myself is what diffuses the tension. So that's actually a technique that I think that is really important to remember. So instead of making fun of somebody else or making them the butt of the joke, you kind of like lay it on me. Well, I'm in sales, of course, everything I say is true. So I love that. That's actually a really great idea for if somebody doesn't know how to use humor or is afraid to use it. You certainly can make a joke about yourself.
Yeah. And one of my favorite ones is that, and people will go, well, how long have you been in sales, or why are you in sales? And I always tell them, I go, well, it's because I thrive on rejection, and that was when I was single. That was my opening line to girls. I would say, hey, I thrive on rejection. I was wondering if I could buy you a beer, and they would go, no, because they'd look at me and go, no. And then I go back to my friends who were also using the same pickup line, and we would high five each other like we were really enjoying being rejected by these women. So, it was, there again, that's a bad situation when you're single and ready to mingle and you're, and you look like we did. We were just hot messes. And that you're selling.
We didn't know we were going to get dating advice today. Selling.
Yeah, but think about that. This is one of the things I talked about. You're always selling. And when you're in a dating situation, you're selling yourself. And, but that's what we used to do is, I thrive on rejection. Would you be interested in some long-term care insurance, or something?
Oh my God, Chris, this is funny. No, this is excellent. And that makes sense. So let's talk about, somebody might be watching, might be listening, they're a salesperson, or maybe they're the CEO, or maybe they are a salesperson with a CEO. And they're going to get feedback like, yeah, we're not going to do that. This is not the brand of the company, or, we want you to follow a certain script. Would you say, try to convince somebody to use humor with selling? Would you say test it? Or would you say, well, that's just a lost opportunity? How would you respond to that when a salesperson that is listening to this says, yeah, well, that's not going to work for me? What would you say?
There again, it goes back to how comfortable you are with it. If you're not comfortable, I worked with a big life insurance company years ago, and we had a lot of different personalities there. And some guys just were not comfortable wearing a coat and tie, much less telling somebody a small joke. And then you have the guys who we were required to have a coat and tie, but they always had their tie unbuttoned and, down about halfway, and their coat was nasty looking, and they were selling just as much as the rest of us. So it really depends on if I'm the CEO and I'm trying to set the culture for my company, I don't know if I would tell people not to use humor. I mean, you can always have some humor. You go to their conference, they're going to have a humor, somebody there's going to be speaking funny or telling some jokes or lighthearted anecdotes, anything like that. Even there again, just stories about other clients. I had a client and he did this, and I give examples, and I'm not demeaning him. I'm just saying, well, this guy, he misunderstood what I said, and he said this comment. So that, I'll tell you a quick one I had years ago. I had a man came in and he wanted to buy some disability insurance. And he was a groundskeeper at a golf course. And so I'm taking the application. I didn't know the man. I sat down with him, took his name. I was getting his information. And I said, do you use tobacco? I got his date of birth. And I said, do you use tobacco? And he said, no, but they let me ride the lawnmower sometimes. And it took me a minute to figure out that he thought I had said backhoe. and I sat there for the next 4 pages of this application, just giggling my ass off. And he thought I was just like high or something. I don't know. It was just funny. But I tell that story to people other clients, and they start laughing. So, it's like that. Nobody's offended there. It's just a funny story. That's something that you can share. So I think universally, I don't understand why a company would say we want no humor in our, unless they're the, who were the bad guys in the Santa Claus TV show. Anyway, the guys in Germany that didn't like kids and didn't. Anyway,
I don't know who they are either. Yeah, but I get what you're saying. Like that. Yeah. All right. So I'm envisioning right now, if I was the CEO of a large company and I had a bunch of salespeople, I would get somebody like you in to come to the next conference and be like, teach us how to sell with humor, because I think there's not enough humor in the day for anybody. And people are so isolated these days. I think we haven't even really touched on that. You're now selling virtually and you're, having meetings and stuff, but a lot of us work from home. You and your on the 89th floor of your Chris Castanes, World Trade Center. I'm here in Vermont in the middle of nowhere. Meeting up with people and having, a coffee and having a chuckle and a laugh, that bonds people, right? So I think that what you just shared with us, it just made my gears go. And I was like, oh man, how can I inject some more humor in my talks?
Well, I'll tell you a great example. I'll give you a great example. Aflac years ago, before they had the duck, I don't know if you ever remember those commercials. They were horrible. And it was very sappy, and they'd always show the father with the son, and he's walking down the beach, and he'd say, oh, did I mention he has his mother's eyes? And, and everybody was like, okay, whatever. It's another sappy insurance company. When they came out with the duck, that was humorous. Right. And man, now everybody just hears, if you say the duck, and people will just go, Aflac, like that. Yeah. I mean, it's just, they don't even think about it.
Right.
And I don't even sell Aflac.
Yeah.
you know, it's like that kind of humor just transcended that whole company. So there again, from a humorous side of if I was a company owner, I would be like, yeah, let's get something in here to lighten the mood a little bit. If nothing else, to boost a little bit of morale with the ranks and see what happens, you know.
Yeah. So I had one more question about personal branding and putting humor into that, but we're running out of time. But I think that is something that if you're watching, you're listening, that you should consider, right? You know, maybe not adopt a duck and have it say the name of your brand, but you know, animals do really, really well. What's the other way? The guy with the emu, right? Who is the
Emu.
guy? Yeah, emu. There's all kinds of brands out there that have done a really good job with a little bit of humor. And so if you're thinking about, you know, my brand feels a little stale, or I need a new sales book, right? Maybe inserting some humor is all you need. So Chris, if somebody's interested to learn more about you, your podcast, your book, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, you can find me at chriscastanes.com, and there you can comment, leave me a message, whatever. And there's also, I forgot to mention, there's a second book, Nearly Motivated is the name of it, like me. And so they're both on Amazon.
Okay.
And then if you want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn there as well. I enjoy LinkedIn quite a bit.
And I'll make sure to put all the links to Chris's 2 books and his website and LinkedIn in the show notes. So if you've made it all the way to the end and you're highly motivated to inject some humor into your sales, then connect with Chris. Make it super easy. Chris, thank you so much for being with us today. I'll be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.